Hi everyone, let's talk about Fortet, an electronic music project spearheaded by Kieran Hebden, who started out in '99, debuting with Dialogue. He would slowly build his catalog up until 2003's Amazing Rounds, a great starting point for anyone who wants to dive into the realms of IDM and folktronica music. Its ideas are fresh, smart, and very inventive for its time, and even to this day, it still feels like it didn't come out that long ago. It wasn't until 2010's There Is Love in You that Kieran would experiment with Microhouse music, an album that was just really well-rounded. It was such a good record. It's an album that still sounds amazing to this day. But I have to admit, I have not been the hugest fan of Fortet's music up until this point. Of course, I like the well-received albums, Rounds and There Is Love in You, but I've never really liked the other albums. For one, I feel like these albums don't feel as inventive or as creative as his most acclaimed albums are. And I just feel like there are so many ideas bouncing around on other albums that Rounds or There Was Love in You kind of honed in on. Going into this album, I was crossing my fingers that this was going to be a good album, a great album. With the singles leading up to this record like Baby or 4T Recordings, I was quite excited. But I gotta say, 16 Oceans is yet again another unimaginative foray into Microhouse and ambient music. Let's start with the production on this album, which I don't have a lot of criticisms for. It sounds very pleasant, like the ambient textures on 4T Recordings and the chilling vocal samples that are used on that track. It just adds another layer, another dimension to this song as a whole, making this easily the best song on this record by a mile. The song Baby incorporates an Ellie Goulding vocal snippet, which Kieran uses in a very creative way. I think the song is really good, but most of the time on this record, the production doesn't really go past very nice atmospheres, which yes, it's an ambient album, but engage me in some way, shape, or form. The song Green feels like a very tedious ambient interlude that feels like it's going to progress into something, but it just ends so abruptly. The song is almost 4 minutes long too. I don't know what Kieran was doing with his time on this song, but it just felt so anticlimactic. The song This Is For You is pretty boring as well, and the two songs that bisect this album, Hi Hello and ISTM, are so pointless. Fortet has been no stranger to putting these very short, quick songs in his albums. They're all over most of his albums past There Is Love in You. But it feels like on this album he's just kind of wasting time with these short songs and that he's not doing anything other than just incorporating them into this album. This album was also very front-loaded too. Like, there are some really interesting highlights in the front half of this album, but the latter half gets pretty stale. Now, that's not to say every song in the first half of this album is good. The song School starts this album off with a very trite house drum rhythm. This rhythm section has been used over and over and over again with numerous house cuts. It's fairly tedious as well, and I think Harpsichord, it has something going for it, but it just needs more time to really flourish. The song Love Salad does have a great progression to it, but near the last minute of the song, it gets a little rough. What I mean by that is, it feels like it runs out of the idea and it just kind of does something random. I think Kieran could have really cut this song off at the 6-minute mark. Insect Near Piha Beach feels like a Kelly Lee Owens song for some reason. That isn't necessarily a bad thing because Kelly Lee Owens does make some interesting house music, but this is a Fortet album. I don't want to hear another person on a Fortet album. To contrast with the negative things about this album, there are beautiful highlights, like again the song 4T Recordings, and I love a lot of the natural sampling that's done on this record. You have birds singing and a little bit of static coming here and there on some songs. I also like some of the woodwind instruments that occur on the song Teenage Birdsong, and the album ends off with a very beautiful ambient piece, Mama Teaches Sanskrit, which is an interesting point I would like to make about Fortet in general. I would kind of like to see him make an ambient album. Like, I would be pretty interested in that. But back to this album. Look, Fortet has made some very interesting and very enjoyable house music as well as IDM music. But he's been able to do that when he's honed in his style and his craft. On 16 Oceans, it feels like there are ideas bouncing around back and forth, but they haven't been fully placed. It's the equivalent of putting pictures on a board but not gluing them down. You have a rough idea what everything's going to be and what everything's going to sound like, but these ideas are not fully fleshed out. I truly believe that Fortet has another great album within him. He just really needs to hunker down and kind of get it out of him. But in all seriousness, there are some really great ideas that occur on this album. I just wasn't fully invested. And not to diminish your enjoyment of this album, because I do see a lot of people enjoying this album online, but for me personally, it's just kind of the same ideas that he's been doing across other albums as well. I also will add that I get the reason why people like this album and why people like Fortet as an artist. But for me personally, I just wasn't convinced with this album. At the end of the day, look, it's nothing more than a C+ for me. However, I am curious to know what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below. Let me know what albums you want me to review next. That is it. Leave a like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember, this is only my opinion because music is subjective.